Welcome back to the channel and to the next episode of Game Mechanics. If you're new to this series, this is where I do my best from an enthusiast perspective to break down and analyze different game mechanics, how they affect the gameplay experience, what happens when you modify them. That is to make you think of many of the common trappings and mechanics that are in games and look at them more analytically as to why they are there, how they change how the player approaches the game, and how it changes the way developers might balance the game as well. Today we're going to talk about another mechanic, one that's been around in one form or another for quite some time. Talking about power-ups. Let's take a look at some of the earlier games that they were first used in and how they changed over the years. Because make no mistake, as much as these seem like relics of the past, by the end of this video, you're going to have a new appreciation for how developers have worked these in under the guise of other items. That said, let's get started. Since the early days of gaming, at least the 8-bit era, power-ups have been a part of games. Sometimes they protect you from damage, other times they give you a new ability to help you do more damage. Not only do these assist the player, they make the game more fun, interesting, and dynamic in playstyle. This, at least to me, can lead to some of the most interesting game experiences. Learning what power-ups are in there, learning how to use them, even to the point of seeing players challenge themselves by not using them at all. These abilities can change up how players approach the game, open up new avenues, and give a ton of flexibility to the player. However, they have to be balanced properly or they may disrupt the game balance that the developers were going for. With all this said, let's take a moment to look at a few examples of power-ups and how they've affected the games that they're in. One of the easiest examples I can think of to begin talking about power-ups, again, is our good friend Mario. In particular, Super Mario Bros. The reason for this is its simplicity. Mario has 3 and only 3 power-ups in this game. The first is the iconic mushroom. This causes Mario to grow much larger and be able to break blocks. It also supplies Mario with some form of defense. Instead of dying in one hit, now he shrinks down instead of losing a life. So in this instance, it gives Mario new abilities and provides armor. The beauty of this power-up is just how beneficial it is and how it works seamlessly into the primary gameplay. No adjustments are needed. In the player's part, they just add the power-up and you simply play like normal. The second power-up is the Fire Flower. This not only makes Mario grow like the mushroom, it also allows him to throw, well, fireballs. This gives Mario a projectile that's tied to the same button as your run button. This does 2 things. 1, it keeps the gameplay simple. By using the same button as the run button, you remove the need for more buttons in your control scheme and make the run button more dynamic and useful than it was before. Secondly, it adds a layer of complexity to the game while leaving the main gameplay just as fluid and easy as it was to start. Basically, by letting Mario throw fireballs, you give the player more ways to deal with larger groups of enemies, tougher enemies, and enemies in spots that would potentially be awkward to hit by just jumping on them. The last power-up that Mario has is the Star. This allows Mario to run right through any enemy blocking his path, taking no damage at all. It's hard to explain just how brilliant and powerful this power-up is. Honestly, it's pretty much perfect in its design. It works flawlessly with the main gameplay, so you don't have to think about anything at this point, aside from going as fast as you can to make the most use of the limited time on the power-up. It also lets the player simply focus on platforming of the game and not the hazards. The funny thing about this one is just how tricky the developers were with it. When you pick up the star, the music changes, so the player knows that he or she is on a time limit. This causes the player to want to rush quickly through the stage. This sense of urgency, along with the invincibility, emboldens the player into taking more risks, often leading to a mistake and player death. As you can see in this one very simple game, you can see just how powerful a well-designed power can be and how the developer can use them. But what does this truly do? Why add complexity to your game that you then have to balance around, and what else does that do for the player? Well, we've already touched on a few of these, but let's go ahead and take a look at them a bit more closely, shall we? First off, why add the complexity in the game? Well, part of it's to make the game more engaging. If Mario could just run and jump, it would be fun, but it wouldn't be very super, would it? By adding power-ups, the developer can then hide them in parts of the stage, and then reward the player with them for finding them as a temporary benefit. This makes the player feel good for finding the power-up and makes the game easier. It also promotes exploration and experimentation in the stage, making it so the player will take more time looking for hidden secrets, increasing player engagement. Other times the developer simply wants to add them to give the player options. Adding in different power-ups can lead to players finding new, faster, more interesting ways to approach the game. This promotes experimentation inside the game and leads to greater replayability for the player. Scenarios can then be created to promote using a particular power-up that the player wouldn't normally favor, teaching them how to better use it on the fly, which in turn can prompt the player to look for that particular boon more often, simply to experiment with other interesting ways to use it. Sometimes a developer will just put something in the game and make it work into the balance because it's cool or fun. Developers are just like you and I. They have an idea that they like and they'll spend hours and hours working it into the game simply because it fits a certain aesthetic, or it's just a cool idea they really want to work into the game. Anything that can be built and handled within the confines of the game without breaking it often can, is, and should be considered during the development process. In short, anything that adds the fun factor to the game without breaking it can only enhance the overall experience. Now, we've spent a considerable amount of time talking about temporary power-ups that are for the most part optional for the player to use, but not necessary for the experience. Now let's take a look at some games built around a more permanent power-up system, and what more iconic example to use for this than the Metroid series. I know, some of you are going to say Zelda, and that obviously fits, but Metroid not only uses the power-up system in a way to make the combat more engaging and dynamic, but also for pure exploration. Zelda does this to an extent, but not to the same way Metroid does. Here's a game balanced not only around multiple power-ups, but requiring them to reach certain areas and unlocking new pathways into old areas. This again promotes exploration, which is the foundation of the series. By giving the player power-ups in a specific way, they promote a new way of thinking each time, encouraging them to naturally use these abilities and find more ways to explore the world that the developers built for them. Many times games like this will also use the idea of a power-up as part of character progression, a way of empowering the player by allowing them to earn or find new kinds of abilities. This allows them to deal with encounters that would have given them trouble in the past with much greater ease, or just give them more flexibility and flair in the game, like getting new combos in a beat-em-up style game, or unlocking a new weapon style. This gives you the feeling of character growth and can help tell part of the story again through gameplay without ever even having to say a word to the player. I know what you're thinking. All these games are old. Most modern games don't have these, say Metroid. You think that, huh? What if I said most modern games have some kind or multiple kinds of what would be considered power-ups? Let's take a look at, say, The Witcher. But that's not a platformer. That's not an old game. I love that game. How dare you geeks! Oh, I'm going there. Just you watch me. In The Witcher, you play Geralt, who's, well, a witcher. Given the nature of his work, he often has to study and understand the prey he's going after, and to that end, has a number of spells, armaments, and potions. You seeing it yet? Alright, stick with me. I think this will make more sense in a minute. You can make potions that get applied to your sword, or that you just drink, giving you a general boost to stats or toward a specific monster type by applying it to your sword, reducing poison damage, taking or increasing damage to monster X or Y. Essentially, these act as, well, crafted power-ups. Roguelikes also approach this with permanent power-ups and various boons and items you can buy before you start your run. Various relics and potions can be purchased to make the run easier and more customizable towards playstyle. The player can even run into blessings while delving deeper into the game. Hades also uses a mechanic that you could classify as a power-up in the form of boons that the player gets from the gods. These randomly offered augments to the player's abilities basically are power-ups. What this all does in the end is add character, personality, and flavor into the game. It takes the basic experience and augments it into something far more than the sum of its parts. Think back to some of your favorite games for a minute and imagine, say, Super Mario Bros. With no power-ups. Would it still be fun? Absolutely. Would it be a lesser game for it? Very much so. The same could be said for Hades and The Witcher. People want fun and interesting ways to interact with games the developers have created. The more interesting and dynamic ways the team can show off their skill can lead to a more visually and mechanically engaging experience, while also allowing for more accessibility for people across skill ranges. What do you mean by accessibility, you say? Well, simply put, you take a game like Cuphead, for example. Imagine for a minute if you took all the guns, dashes, and extra life out of the game and then tried to run it. This is already an exceptionally tough game, giving players the option of augmenting their health, adding a new dash, even picking up other weapons that are more powerful, gives the player the ability to customize the experience towards their personal playstyle, and in essence, making the game far more accessible and approachable by a wider audience. If you just had the base gun and base damage, not only would it be a less interesting game in comparison, it would also have a much higher skill floor than it already has, which is significant to say the least. With all this said, let's tie up what this does for the developers and for us as the player. 1. Accessibility. Adding in power-ups like this makes the games that would normally be unapproachable to many far more manageable. On top of that, it allows for players to customize their playstyle and find new ways to play the game that's more to their liking. 2. Replayability. If you only had a set weapon and no way to augment your character, you rely more on the stage design and varied gameplay types to keep the gameplay fresh. By allowing various power-ups, you enhance replayability by allowing the player to experiment with different ones, making the same game feel fresh longer than it would if you had not added them in. 3. Wow factor. Developers like to show off as much as anyone, and having a cool power set or power-ups that get the player's attention or just seem fun and engaging makes the experience more fun as a whole. 4. Storytelling. Many times the things you don't say, that you just show, tell more of the story than all the cutscenes in the world. By showing Geralt crafting potions or your hero buying boons or items before starting a run in a roguelike, you show forethought and preparation. Even showing new weapons or magical abilities like Nimpo and Ninja Gaiden, you show preparedness and training, making it a great way to show the character's personality, focus, and training. 5. Character progression. Oftentimes these power-ups are either their accessibility or permanency can lead to new avenues or just overall character progression. This can be used to open up the world more, or even just show character growth and development in seeing their skills grow and change over the course of the game, giving the player more flexibility and giving them a greater sense of accomplishment while playing the game. So the next time you look at a new weapon, boon, or potion, think about what part of the story the developer is telling and what it does for you as the player. And how does it fit into the game? How does it change your approach? How much fun does it add to the experience? What would it be like if it was gone? And most importantly, what does it tell you about the game, your character, and the world you're in when you're playing the game? I'd like to thank all of you who got this far in the video. Hopefully this has given you new insight and appreciation for the different types of power-ups that the developer can introduce into the games that you play, along with how they can affect and tell the story of the game through the very mechanics you use. What are some of your favorite power-ups in video games? How did they enhance the experience? What made them so memorable? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you'd please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, if you're not, consider subscribing. I try to put out videos like this as often as I can, and every little bit helps me know that you appreciated the video and it helps the metrics. However, for now, thank you once again, and until next time, happy gaming.